Alright guys, so today we're going to be tying the same fly that I used in the Land of the Hoppers video. I'll have that link below if anyone wants to check it out. But we had an awesome day fishing hoppers on the river, got into some really nice brown trout. But yeah, this will be the exact same fly that I used that day. I've actually got the exact pattern I used for like the whole video. And you can actually just see how torn up it is from all the teeth marks from those fish. Some of those bigger browns, they've got some serious teeth on them. So we're going to start with some GSP thread, and we're just working it to the back of the hook. And then we're going to take some crystal flash, and we're just going to add a little snippet of it and put it in the back. You don't need a ton of it. I go pretty light on it. This is just to add a little extra flash in to the fly, catch the fish's attention. And then we're going to snip that pretty short, just about right there. Alright, next we're going to use some yellow dubbing. So I just have a little dubbing pack right there, but any dry fly dubbing that's just yellowish like that will work. We're going to use a very small amount of it. So we're going to do really thin. We're going to twist that onto the thread. Don't need a ton of it for this part because this is just kind of building up the back for where we're going to add on the foam. Okay, that's all we need right there. So next, time to cut out the foam. I'm just using some tan foam, same foam I use on my mice patterns if you watched the last video. So we're going to cut the foam down so it looks just about like that. And then I'm going to take the scissors. This might be kind of hard to see, but I'm actually going to stick them inside the foam about right there. And then I'm just going to cut a line going up the center of the foam. This is just kind of let that hook kind of sink in there a little bit. It's going to be hard to see on the camera. But basically you're just cutting a slot like that, and that's going to allow it to sit on that hook so it's not riding on the top as much. So now we're going to put that on. Sizing it up. Okay, about right there is good. And then we're just going to tie that on right there at the end of that little ball of dubbing we made. There we go. Now it's time to add on the rubber legs. So I'm using these rounded rubber legs right here. And I'm going to pull 2 strands off, but keeping them together for the legs. So as you can see, I kept the 2 strands together. And we're just going to tie an overhand knot into these. Now we're going to tighten it down pretty good. You want to make sure that you tighten it enough that it lays flat. So now you can see that we got a little knot in there, and that's going to kind of help it bend down. So next what we're going to do is we're actually going to break away this strand right here. And then we're going to snip that off right there. And now we have that single leg with a little bit longer part right here, or a little thicker part right here. Now we're going to tie that in, making sure that it's facing downwards. And I go pretty long on the legs. I really think that having legs that really stick in the water is what's going to make or break a pattern when it comes to hoppers. I always have the best luck when the legs are slightly on the longer side than the shorter side. And then once you get that tied on, let's turn it around so you can see. We're just going to snip off that end that we don't need. Okay, now we're going to do the other side. So I'll take that same strand, tie my overhand knot into it, just like that. Now we're going to break off that strand right there, so we just have one strand. And then we're just going to snip that bottom strand off, so we just have that one strand. And then tie it in the same length as we did on the other one. And once we got that tied in, we'll just snip it off. Just like that. Now we got our legs. So next is we're going to add some more of that yellow dubbing. We want to go pretty thin, but we can put a lot on there. So long on the length, but make really thin strands of it. And then we're just going to wrap it around. And kind of build up a little bit of bulk here because it's going to help push those legs backwards. And then we're going to add a little bit more on. Might do one more wrap and then pull that back, and then we're going to work it to the front of the hook. Still keeping the wraps pretty thin. You really don't want to go thick on the dubbing because you want it to sit inside a little bit. You probably don't even need to use dubbing on it, but I like to use it because I think it helps it float just a little bit better. But the idea is most of that hook just kind of sit in that gap that we made when we cut the center of that foam, cut that line down the center. The reason I like this pattern is mostly because of the hook I'm using. It's got such a big hook gap on there that when you get a bite, you really aren't missing that fish unless you just really screw it up. But I have a really good hookup rate on these hoppers. A lot of hoppers tend to have too much material on them, and it covers up that hook shank, and that's actually going to cause you to miss a lot of fish. So if you're missing a ton of fish on hoppers, one, it could be because you're setting the hook too early. But if you feel like you're setting the hook right, it might be just that hook. There's just not enough clearance on the hook to actually hook the fish. I actually have a video on that where I kind of go a little more in depth. I'll have that link down below too. But we're just working it all the way to the front of the hook, keeping that dubbing pretty thin. And then right there is about where we want it. We're going to pull the foam, lay it on there. And I like to really kind of push it and work it in that gap right there. Make sure it's tucked up under there. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to do our wraps to kind of secure that. And then just really crank down on it. Now it's time to add on the front legs. So we're going to take 2 strands again, keeping them together from our rubber legs. And then we're going to do the same thing we did in the back. We're just not going to make them quite as long. So we're going to add in our knots. And you tighten the knot, making sure that the foot's facing down. Then we're going to break apart that bottom strand, and we're just going to snip that off. So it should look like this. And then we're just going to tie that in. I like to make the length just to about the middle of where we tied the dubbing in here to the tail. I just put it right there in the middle. And then you just tie that down. Now, since these are the front legs, what we can actually do too is instead of cutting off this tag end right here, we can break it apart, snip one of those strands off, and then now we have the front leg right there as well. So now we're just going to do the same thing to the other side. Take our 2 strands, tie in our knot, break apart the bottom strand underneath the knot, and snip off the side we don't need. Make sure it's facing down, and then we're going to tie this in, make it the same length as we did to the other side, then do a couple wraps to hold that down. Making sure everything stays lined up, and then we'll break that apart. So we're going to take that other end, pull it apart, and then snip off the one we don't need. Just like that. Then we can kind of size up these bottom ones. You can clip it to whatever length you want. I usually clip it to just about the same as the other side. So now we're going to add in a little orange marker for the top of the fly. This is just to help us see it. You're just going to cut out a thin rectangle. Doesn't need to be anything crazy. So we're just cutting out a little tag like that. And then we're just going to tie that into the top. And this is just to help us spot it in the water. Yeah, there's our little tag. Now we're going to take some more yellow dubbing, and we're just going to kind of finish off the fly with this yellow dubbing. And then, like I said at the start, the reason we're adding in this dubbing is to kind of split those legs apart so they stick forward and back. So we're going to grab those legs, make sure they're positioned where we want them to be. And then we're going to add that dubbing to it. Add in one more wrap of dubbing, and then we'll work it to the front of the hook. And then right there, all we gotta do is whip finish. And then take some glue. We're just gonna pop a little glue in there, cure it with the UV light. And then there's one last thing we're gonna do this fly once the glue cures. And then we're just gonna trim that head to where we want it. So I usually go like 1/2 centimeter in front of the eye of the hook, about right there. And there you have it, a nice simple grasshopper pattern with a nice big hook gap on it. So if you get a fish that bites this fly, you're not missing it with this hook gap on there. Remember, always check your flies before fishing them when you're using large patterns to make sure it has a big enough hook gap. Because if there's too much material in the way, it can cause you to miss fish. So yeah, there's the fly. I hope you guys enjoyed this pattern. If you did, check out some of my other videos down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.